All right, shalom, shalom. Forgive my unconventional setting. I was actually out, and I felt like this would be a great time to do our first lesson from A Wise Woman Builds Her House. So we have this book. This is what we're going to be using. And so pull it out. If not, I'll try to do my best to show the pages so you can kind of see what we're doing. I am super excited. I'm not going to say so much. My mom was like, you say a lot. Sorry. It's when I get excited. All right. Go to study 3 if you have the book. And I'm going to keep this relatively short because I know most people are at work or tuning in. So I want these lessons, if I do break in on the middle of your day, I want them to be concise, and I want them to be enough so that you can go back and kind of begin looking at these words and seeing exactly what they meant. I am excited, and we'll get into that. If you have questions, email them to me because I'm not going to address them when I'm live, especially when I'm doing these lessons, okay? So if you have questions about what I'm doing, though, then I definitely will. But we want to keep it as on topic as we possibly can so that I won't take up a bunch of your time in the middle of your day. Okay, so we're on study 3, and study 3 has the word submit. Now, submission is one of those things that women who come across them are immediately put off. Most of the time, women are put off because they have been given definitions for these words that don't line up with scripture, or on the other side, they have an issue with submission to the person that they have committed to be married to. So we're going to address those two things. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You should not, if you're not married, I can't really directly connect this to women who are married. That's a separate topic. But if you are not married, do not marry someone, okay, who you have an issue submitting to. It's like enlisting in the army and then being insubordinate. The whole purpose of army is to create order and rank for the protection of people. I'm not talking about American Army. I'm talking about army in general. This idea of a confederate of people who have joined together for a common purpose. That is the purpose in one aspect of marriage. Do not join yourself and commit to someone who you have an issue submitting to. Because when we get into this idea of submission, it's going to be very difficult to carry out the function of submission if you hate the person that you are with. Does not mean that you do not have to carry out the function for all the ladies who are married to people who they may not be pleased with, because the function of submission can only produce function, which means that in submission, and I mean submission without fear or trembling or wondering what's going to come of it, true submission will lead to either that person hating the submission and removing themselves, or that person being won over to the Father by your lifestyle. Okay? All right, so all of us have probably heard this at one time or another if we come from a previous religious background, but we're going to redefine it as a Hebrew. All right, Ephesians 5:21 said, submitting yourselves one to another in fear. One thing that we never get about submission is that there is a reciprocity and mutuality that comes with the function of submission, which leads back to my previous point. All right, so the first word that we have, if you have the book, is the word anah. And anah means to watch intently, concentrate, humble, be preoccupied or busied with, to be in a position that makes one look up. Okay? And the angel of Yahuwah said unto her, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hand. Genesis 16:9. That is what the angel of Yahuwah said to Hagar, who was the handmaiden that belonged to, that belonged to Sarah. Am I playing to a blank? Okay, we're going to go through all of these, and then I'll put together what these mean in a whole so you can kind of see how this book actually functions. All right. The next one you have is kahash, and the word is pretend obedience to correct, deny justified demands, to withhold something to get a desired outcome, withholding to cause leanness, to withhold what you have in your hand to afflict another. Okay, so we'll see it again. Same people in this instance. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. So this idea of denial being this connected to this word here. Her laughter in this text was different than other laughter, because one was counted as when Abraham didn't believe, it was his disbelief, right? But he said, how can this be? But her laughter, her denial, was almost a denial of, okay, I'm gonna go with this, but don't really understand it. You know, sometimes when you go along with something, it kind of makes you laugh. You're like, okay, you could be pulling my leg, but you might not be. So I'm just gonna go with it to see what the outcome is. It's I trust, but I'm like, this is kind of funny, and I go along with it as well. I'm gonna tie all these three together, okay? The last one is refes, and it's to stomp down the head, trampling or stomping with speech, impoverish or lower, cause to cover or control. Okay, so it says, rebuke the company of spearmen, the multitude of the bulls with the calves of the people, till everyone submit himself with pieces of silver. Scatter thou the people that delight in war. So I know initially when you're reading through these, you're like, okay, but how are all these connected to this one thought in my head? The reason why you get different verses that don't necessarily all deal with wives submit to your husband, wives submit to your husband, is because you need to see how these words function, right? Before you can then apply them into your personal life. So many times as believers, we try to put it into our personal life before we see how it functions. Because everything doesn't always have to look how it everything doesn't always have to feel right to you for it to be right, okay? And submission is one of those things. Just because it doesn't feel right to you doesn't mean that it's not right. We grew up, most of us who grew up in a Western culture, grew up in a culture where the function of submission is very, 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 very far removed from our understanding of what submission looks like. So I'm giving you three different ways that submission can be seen, and I'm going to explain to you in this one situation how different types of submission can still yield the same result, but then there is a correct way to do it. Okay, so let's work our way backwards. So this idea of refes, right? This idea of stomping down the head, or to stomp with speech, impoverish, lower, cause to cover, control. That is a form that a person can use against another person to cause them to submit. Can a man use this form of submission to get a person to do what they want them to do? The answer is absolutely yes. It can be used toward a woman. It can be used in war. It can be used. It means to go at something and to subdue it. So you subdue it in fear and in these other ways. And you can get, like in this verse, he goes, okay, rebuke the company, subdue the spearmen until they bring their silver. I'm going to go after you so hard and in such a rough way that you're going to do what I said to do. Okay? But in the sense of relationship, this can break a person. So when a woman is caused to submit because a man in his mind understands that a woman should submit, but then her being forced to, and stomped down and trampled over and impoverished and lowered and caused to cover and to be controlled, it can then cause inner resentment, where a person can be in full submission yet be resenting the person they're submitted to the whole time. This makes me think of biblically, most people don't understand why in scripture that when they would go to war in certain places and the men would be told to kill all women who have laid with the man, and then all of the male children, but you could keep the young women and the girls who had not been with a man. And immediately you go, oh, that's just so terrible, right? But then you see this idea of refes in this term, in this word, and this idea that through war and through subduing, you can subdue women and their children and nations. But why are you then told to kill those people? Because of that inner resentment. That inner resentment, right, is the thing that will rise up later. So let's just take an example. If you take a nation, and the Israelites go into this nation and they kill the men, and they have women, their sons, and their daughters left. The women, if they are taken into the home of another man as his wife, she has already been with another man, and her loyalty is to that man. Imagine it. If somebody came right now into your home, killed your husband, and just left you and your children alive, then your only thought in your mind, if you had a son, right, would be first to submit to this man so that he doesn't kill the rest of your children. So culturally, you would do everything that was asked of you. And you wouldn't show any sign of disdain, because then that man would then rise up and kill you as well. So you would feign obedience or pretend obedience, and we'll get to that next word. But you would do those things because of the trampling and the stomping down of your nation. You would do the obedience, but then all the while you would be training your son secretly to not forget. Don't forget your father. Don't forget that he died so that you could be alive. Don't forget the sacrifice I'm making. Don't forget, and you would have all these things ruminating into your son's mind, and you'd be teaching it to your son, so that when your son is old enough and strong enough, that he would rise up and kill the master of the house. Okay? So can you be in submission and still have aught in your heart? Yes. That's why in a relationship, right, where there is a nation built and people who are being gathered together under one goal, it can't be done in this form. Is it possible? Yes. But is it effective? Maybe you can make the argument for yes, but is it going to yield the proper outcome in the end? The answer is no. Okay? The submission of war should not be used in the home, because we are not at war with one another. We are building to create a nation. Okay? Let's go to Kahash. This one is this idea of pretend obedience, and it means to correct, to deny justified demands. So this is another step. This step is this idea that a lot of women, and I hate to blast it out, I hope there's no men listening, but a lot of women, including myself at times, have used this, maybe might even still, if you don't necessarily agree with something all the time. And it's this idea it's twofold. So it could be pretend obedience, which is I'm obedient because I see the benefit that I get out of being obedient, but really I'm not all with this, but it benefits me too, so I'm just doing it. Okay? The other one is this idea of to cause another person to submit. Now this worked, faking it, right? This works on both sides, okay? This idea to withhold something to get the desired outcome. You're gonna hate me for this, ladies. You're gonna hate me. But using sex to get the desired outcome in submission is not only evil, but it is completely dysfunctional, because it creates an imbalance in the relationship, and it shows lack of maturity, because there's other ways for us to convey and to receive what we need from our men, and that way is through Torah. And take it from somebody who's been on both sides of the fence. And remember, I don't say anything that has not been something that I've experienced or done, okay? Why? Because if it was done on the other end, it's like witchcraft, right? You're controlling the emotions and controlling something sacred to get what you want. And normally what it leads to is most of the time us as women getting our feelings hurt, because nobody is going to get hurt but you, because you're the only one knowing that you're secretly dibbling and dabbling and all this manipulation and not getting what you want and being frustrated and then being double frustrated and doing this again, and it doesn't work, okay? The same thing on the man's side, because when a man is being manipulated, if he finds out he is, then he begins to do the same thing, and then it becomes this thing where it breaks down the trust. Okay, so withholding something to get a desired outcome is also not the proper way. Can it work? Yeah. And can it work on the other side? Yes. So that's why you have women who do stuff for money, because it's idea of submission. If I buy you this purse, if I buy you this fancy stuff, I can do whatever I want in the relationship, because my power that I have over you is I have something you want, and I can withhold this and cause you to do whatever I want you to do. Likewise for women, if it's your body, right? Your power is to withhold your body to get what you want. But in both instances and for both people are being used. The man is being used because you have something and you know that somebody's using you. And on the flip side, the other person has something that you want and you know that you're going to use what you have, which is your body, to get what you want. Both of them are negative. Okay? Pretend obedience. We have to move past pretend obedience. And the way we move past pretend obedience is to knowing what submission is and how submission breeds obedience. We'll get to that. What if you're not manipulating and it's not working? What if you're not manipulating and it's not working? Okay, the final one, and this one, we're going to see all these things work in this one example. So this word ana. And this one has to do with ayin, nun, hey. So it's the eye, literally, that's watching over the seed or intently watching. And then watching and then pointing them back to the Father. So this is that one that'll answer that question of what if I'm doing it and it's not working? Well, the first question is, are you doing it correctly? Because you might be doing it the way you think it should be done, right? But maybe not the way the Father feels like it should be done. And we don't have a time limit on how long we have to do our function until it yields the fruit that we think we should see from our function. Because if we would be honest, our dysfunction has dug some very deep roots into our relationship. And it's going to take just as much, if not more, functionality to uproot the dysfunction that we have bred into our relationships. Okay? So this word ana means to watch intently, to concentrate on, to humble yourselves, to be occupied or busied with, and to be in a position that makes one look up. Okay? So let's revisit this story of Sarah and Hagar. So if you're not familiar with the story, Abraham and Sarah are promised a seed. Sarah, with wisdom, it was wrong, but she did it with her own wisdom, did not necessarily follow the way that the Most High said it would be done, because he said, you and your husband, you two, would have this child. So Sarah goes because she trusted in the promise, right? She trusted the promise of Yah that they would have a child. She understood this idea of having a child through the seed. So she's like, look, my body's old, but the seed doesn't get old. You can take my handmaiden, your seed will go into that woman. She will conceive a child. I will then raise that child. The idea that she is my handmaiden because she belongs to me, which means the seed that she bears from you belongs to me. This is a lot, I know. I'm going to raise this child righteously, and that's how we're going to fulfill me being a mother of a nation and you being the father of the nation. Right? It was just like, duh, that's easy. So what she did is that she then gave up her I'm trying to find a word that doesn't immediately throw people off, but she gave up her, I don't want to say position, but her right to be, the word is coming to me and I can't get it, but her right to be jealous, the thing that other women have when there's another woman around. It's like, oh, you with my man. I can't think of the word, but if you're thinking of it, type it and then I'll say it. She gave up her vessel, but she also gave up she humbled herself. She really changed the way that she had to think about things and how she had to go about things to be in a mental position to allow that and to not feel a certain way. Now what we're going to see is that she still felt that way. So what happens is this baby's born and Hagar has this child, and what happens is because Sarah humbled herself and Hagar didn't, she put the nation ahead of herself. Erica, that's perfect. Sarah put the nation ahead of herself. So when Hagar had this child, her disposition was off, right? And just like, and I hate to say this because people are always like, well, we're not all like that, but we are. We are. Just like a Hebrew woman, she was like, wait, so I did this in humility for the nation, and then you rise up and then somehow begin to act haughty in front of me. Scripture literally says, read it for yourself, that there was physical abuse done to Hagar from Sarah. She's like, oh, no. Not, she was she was very upset. I almost said another word. She was very upset because my humility should have breeded humility into my handmaiden. But now she feels as that she is above me because of something that her body was able to do, and she forgot the mission of the nation and made it personal. And Sarah didn't take it personal. She made it the nation. Okay? So what happens is, with the child, this happened twice, by the way, she sends her away. And sends her away. And it says, and the angel of Yahuwah came to Hagar, and he told her what to do. Okay, so we witnessed all of the idea. Okay, can you stop somebody down into submission? Okay, that was definitely happening, but it wasn't working clearly for Hagar, because it got to a point where she had to be sent away. The other one, where pretend obedience, I'm sure at one point she was pretending to be obedient. Like, okay, well, all right, we're just going to do this. And we'll get to her pretend obedience. So what the Most High tells her to do, to Hagar to do, and I'll tell you why as well, because it's in Scripture. He comes to Hagar, and I don't know, and I don't want to add to what's not there. But he comes to her, because obviously she had to be in some communication and praying about the situation of her and her baby being exiled. Being kicked out of the camp, being exiled, is never a positive thing Hebraically. Being put out literally is a symbol of death. It's like, okay, I'm going to die because all of the protection is within the camp. So she's sent out, and when the Most High comes back to Hagar, he tells her, when he comes to Hagar, the angel of Yahuwah comes to her and says, return to thy mistress and submit thyself under her hands. What kind of remedy is that initially? If you're in a situation that has got you put out and they made you leave, first of all, you're mad, you're ticked off, right? I'm not going back, me and my baby gonna be fine, you know, the whole nine. And the Most High is like, no, you don't get to not do it correctly, because it's not just for your sake, but remember, it's always first about the seed. Seed is what's important. Even if that seed was not the seed that Yah was talking about, it became important. And it became important to the point that when we get to it later, he actually makes a promise to that seed as well. So she has to go back. So the humility it takes to then go back to the person that you were being disobedient under, and the person that you had not submitted under. So remember earlier when I talked about sometimes the damage that is done in our disobedience and our dysfunction will take more obedience. It doesn't take less obedience or giving up, but it takes more obedience, and we don't get to choose how much it takes. All right? So submit yourself under her hand. So what did he call her to do? When we hear submit, we only hear this idea of, okay, what do I think submit is? He's going to just tell me what to do, and I have to do everything that he says to do, and I have to. And you have this convoluted idea of what it is, and it makes you not want to do it, right? But scripturally, when we look at this word anah and what he caused Hagar to do, is that he gave her direct instruction with just one word. The cool thing about Hebrew is that a word to the wise is sufficient, because one word carries so much with it. This is what he told her to do, and I'm going to tell you why. He told her to go back and watch her intently. Watch what she does. When you watch her, you'll see why I chose her. You need to watch her, and you need to mimic her, because the same way that she is not running in the sense of what we feel like is running, but the same way that she is in order and managing her home is how you should be doing. You should be watching her, because it is those qualities that I'm choosing to build a nation, right? To follow her lead. The next is to concentrate. So not just to watch her, but to intently watch her. You should be watching her so intently that you know what she needs and what is necessary for the nation and for the family before she even knows to do it. Nobody loves a friend or a person more than a person who knows them. I am the type of friend that if you're my friend, I am in your head. Not because I am trying to know your whole life and your business, but I am a friend who wants to meet the needs of those around me. I am a mother who wants to meet the needs of the children. I know my husband's patterns. I know what he likes. I know when he gets out of the shower what he's looking for. Why? Because I'm watching you, because I care so much about you that I want to make sure that I meet the need even before it becomes a need. Okay? The idea then was to concentrate, to be humble. So you can't be above a person and serving them at the same time. A servant is a very lowly and humble position, not low as in low to be trampled upon, but low that you're always in a position to bow yourself and serve someone else. Scripture says the servant, the Hamashiach says, the servant is the greatest in the kingdom, not the person being served. So if the Hamashiach has a capacity to serve and serves people who are not even worthy of being served, then you too should have that same spirit about you. You shouldn't always be waiting for somebody to serve you, but you need to first be seeing how you can serve another person. All right? The next one is to be occupied or busy with. This one jumped out at me because it reminded me of what Shaul said to the women in, I think it was Titus. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but it was said, it was either Shaul or Timothy who made this idea that you need to teach the older women to be reverent and to be lovers of themselves and to keep their homes. What does this mean? It means to be busy with your own business so you stay out of other people's lanes. You're not going to be a gossiper if you are intently watching those in your home. Timothy, correct. You're not going to be a gossiper if you're intently watching your husband and those in your home. You're not going to be a backbiter if you are so busy with your work that you're not worrying about somebody else's work. You can't be trying to covet and do other things if you are so busy building the nation that the Most High is put in front of you, and you're so busy submitting to your own home. You won't have time to be worrying about other people's home and what they're doing and what's working out for them and what's not working out for them and what the Father is calling you to do. Okay? And then the last one is to be in a position that makes one look up. Our position of submission and servitude, to answer the question, my sister, our position of submission and servitude should be so beautiful and should yield so much fruit and should be so, I don't even know another word, it should be so functional that other people come and ask, how did you get that to work? How did this become this? How did this work out? And how did you turn all of the chaos that you were experiencing around? True humility. One of the movies, and I'm sure if you have any time in the Christian experience, then you've seen this movie, this idea of Fireproof. This movie, these people have convinced people that it's the book that works. Oh, it's Titus 2. Okay, Titus 2 was that example. This movie convinced people that this love dare is the thing that changed people's marriage. This is what it convinced you of, this idea that you're reading through the Bible and you're taking this dare and you just have to dare to love. But what is the love dare? Fireproof, right? The love dare is actually mutual submission. And sometimes it only starts on one side, right? This submission in this movie, the picture in this movie was this idea of submission. When you are watching intently, concentrating in humility, being busy with, and being in a position of a servant, it causes the person that you are serving to then look toward the maker, because honestly, we are so jacked up as women sometimes that it is the change in us that'll make a person go, yeah, no, she would have definitely went off right now. Or, she didn't even make them act like, for a while they might be a little confused and be like, okay, so last time this happened, she would da-da-da-da-da. But this time she went and she, I gotta figure out what's compelling her to change. That is the idea of being one without a word. You don't have to say anything when you're living out Torah. Torah speaks for itself. You don't have to speak Torah. Sometimes we talk too much. We talk too much about Torah, and you talk so much about it, you don't actually live it. And then if you don't actually live it, then all you are is talk, and talk is cheap. Okay? But submission, a woman who has this disposition, she is priceless, because there is nothing that her submission then can't buy, if you please. Then you are winning a person to then turn and reciprocate and do that same thing back to you. So this idea, if we go back to Ephesians 5:21, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of Yah. Not only in the fear, but in the reverence and the functionality of Scripture, you submit yourselves one to another. Because as you begin to watch him, my husband's competitive, and so am I. So this idea, as you begin to watch him, he's gonna begin to watch you. So sometimes I'll come home and it'll be something simple. I'm like, I was out today, and even no matter how I feel, because a sister once told me that feelings don't mean anything. You're going to go through a bunch of feelings in a day. In the beginning of the day, you're going to wake up, you might feel okay. Then the kids might get on your nerves, you're going to feel a different way. Like, oh, I can't stand you. You gave me these kids, and they don't act right, and they act like you. And you'll go through that feeling, and then you're going to go through the feeling of I'm hungry, so I'm hungry, now I'm mad. And you're going to go through a bunch of feelings throughout the day. So our feelings are not to be trusted. We are to trust in Torah. And it's the thing that drives the functionality behind our actions, so we don't act in dysfunction. Okay? So we don't trust our feelings. So throughout the day, no matter how I feel about him, no matter what he says, he can get up in the morning and just go full steam ahead, not say good morning. I just be like, But I can always, hangry. I can always draw that back in. I can control that based upon how I choose to respond. My response is what solidifies the dysfunction. He can act in dysfunction, but my functionality and my submission can change his dysfunction. So for instance, I can be leaving the house and I'm late and I'm running out and he's irritated and I'm irritated, but I can stop as soon as I'm in a quiet place and say, let me call my husband and say good morning. Let me tell him I love him. Sometimes it might be a little dry, but in the conversation and hearing his response, it then breeds more functionality. So then he's like, you know what? I love you too, and I was just thinking about you and da-da-da-da. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I don't want to keep you too long. I'm going to let you go. And if it was kind of dry, I might need to do some more. Right? I might go, what is something he's asked me to do or something that's been on his mind? What can I take off of his mind? And it could be something like, you know what? He wanted to go by Lowe's and grab such and such. And I'll be like, hey, tell me what you need from Lowe's. I'm going to be in the area. And he'll be like, what? Okay, can you grab me some staples for my staple gun? Sure. And I'm going to do that. And then let me tell you what happens. And I'm speaking from personal experience. So what'll happen is then he'll start to then think about doing those things for you. The other day, we just got back to California from Las Vegas and our room was trash. I mean, there's clothes everywhere. And it was already kind of a mess before I left, and he had been coming back and forth and he made more of a mess. And he puts on his headphones and he goes in the room, and immediately I was about to be like, so you don't want to talk to me? And I come in the room and he began sorting the clothes and then putting the kids' clothes in the separate buckets and clearing out the floor and picking up his stuff. And I was like, wow, okay. So it doesn't always happen in my time. Like, hey, in my time, I would have probably, I mean, they've been there for a while, but watching how immediately he's watching and how, okay, she's doing these other things and she's has a lot of stuff on her plate. And maybe I can fix one space if I can't do anything. And then we begin to intently watch one another, concentrate one another, and be humble. Like, my husband comes from a generation, because he's much older than I am, where women do women stuff and men do men stuff. So to see my husband do what would be termed in his generation women stuff, like pick up clothes with no complaint. I never ask him to do anything that's domesticated, but when he does, I know it's because he's watching me and trying to alleviate a need that I have. Okay. So that is very, 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 very important to keep in mind. Keep in mind. All right, so I hope that gave a little more insight to what's here on this page and what submission really looks like and how it's so beautiful and how functionality in the Hebraic sense yields functionality. It has nothing to do with being jealous. It has nothing to do with one person being above another. It has to do with, I don't worry about my position if I am concentrating and intently watching those around me. I hope that helped. I love each of you, and I hope that applies. We're going to keep going through each of these words and looking through them and really, really internalizing them so we can carry out the function that the Most High has given us. All right? Shalom, shalom.